Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, and we will cover verses 57 to 66 today. The account of Bani Israel, part 3. And I put down over here the salient one of the verses which needs some more detail, Eimaan and Saleh deeds revisited. We have discussed this under permanent values as well, so we will go over some of those points just to remind ourselves. These are the references. Again, in this presentation, I've taken some excerpts from volume 2. And if you remember, this book is now published on Amazon. The first verse of today's talk, verse 57, it is human beings who do injustice to themselves. From verse 256, which we covered in our previous presentation, as far as the removal of the hindrances on their path was concerned, the difficulties and worries of their physical life and also those of human life were removed. It was stated about the conveniences of physical life that وَظَلَّلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْغَمَامَ وَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَنَّ وَالسَّلْوَى كُلُوا مِن طَيِّبَاتِ مَا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ وَمَا ظَلَمُونَا وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. For this you were bestowed with abundances of the means of sustenance without any return or remuneration. And Quran, when it says rizq, it means that the rizq is those means of sustenance which are abundance, that is, these meet our needs, as well as these are provided when these are required. So these two aspects are covered under rizq, and it covers both the physical needs related to the sustenance related to physical needs as well as the human self. In that wild environment, water-laden clouds were casting shadows above your heads. There was very delicious food to eat, the meat of fowls and sweet plants. And these are related to the desert area. That is all the plants which were growing in that area where Bani Israel were residing. These were a cause for you, for your peace and tranquility. But despite even this, you did not adhere to our laws. There was no harm caused to us as a result of this. You only harmed yourselves. And that is the important point here. I have highlighted Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum, and then there is a gap, وَمَا ظَلَمُونَا وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ, that the Quran is reminding them that what happened. There was no harm caused to us as a result of this. You only harmed yourselves, and you did this through your own hands. And Quran has said at many places that human beings do injustice to themselves. Allah does not do injustice to anyone. So that is the bottom line. Reminding Bani Israel about their past condition. In the study of the Quran as a system of deen, we need to relate our routine daily events in life to the permanent values, and this reality is depicted in this verse. This is important. It is not merely knowing things academically and then living our life under the man-made system without applying these permanent values to our life. Because if we do that, then we are not getting the benefit from the study of the Quran. Here the Quran has reminded Bani Israel and us as Muslims that after having been freed from the slavery of Pharaoh, you should have noticed the difference in your daily living. You could now compare and contrast this with your previous mode of living. So comparing and contrasting is a very important point of following the Quran. Here in the open environment of the Sinai, there was no more fear of Pharaoh and his people. And imagine how much freedom they should have been enjoying, but instead they created more problems for themselves. And under the guidance of Wahi, you were also made free from the religious, ritualistic way of living and that calf worship which we touched previously, so that came into it, thus freeing you from false beliefs, superstitions, and the accompanying fear, consequence of shirk. So Wahi of Allah through the messenger Musa had highlighted all kinds of chains which these people had around their self, their thinking. But gradually they will have to be educated and trained to get rid of it. Being in that part of the Sinai where both natural food was available and there was also cloud cover above you to protect you from the heat. Having been made free from seeking the basic necessities of life, you needed to turn your sights far into the future in order to educate and train yourselves under the guidance of the messenger Musa and his brother. There's an important point over here which needs our very profound thinking and reflection. The Quran over here says, and there was also cloud cover above you to protect you from the heat, that how their deeds, their education training, and the messenger leading them was related to this kind of change in the natural phenomena. And this aspect is also covered in Surah Nuh. And this is something which we need to think through it. Because there is no data as such that system of deen, how it is going to benefit from all the natural environment which exists in that part of the land where the deen is established. By stating, Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum, eat of the good things we have provided for you, guidance is provided to make the correct choices in life. And we know tayyibat are all those things which produce positive results, which are beneficial for human life. Then concluded with, وَمَا ظَلَمُونَا وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. To us, they did no injustice, but they did injustice to their own selves. We need to fill in the gap here because this is something we have to think through it, that how they were doing injustice to themselves. Because despite coming out of the grip of Pharaoh, they were not getting maximum out of their life, their conduct, their behavior by following the laws of Allah. Next verse is 58, guidance spelled out for entering a new habitation. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا ادْخُلُوا هَٰذِهِ الْقَرْيَةَ فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا حَيْثُ شِئْتُمْ رَغَدًا وَادْخُلُوا الْبَابَ سُجَّدًا وَكُلُوا حِطَّةٌ نَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ خَطَايَاكُمْ وَسَنَزِيدُ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Now over here, Quran has provided guidance for entering any other population, any other habitation, because they have come out of now Pharaoh's land, that is Egypt, and they are in another area where there must be people living in those areas. So Quran over here has provided general guidance regarding that. Our proposal was that you remain in the land of Palestine victoriously, and in this way, whenever, however you wish, obtain benefit from the means of risk, except with this condition that you keep your heads bowed down before our laws. Palestine is made as an assumption over here. So the thing which we should keep in mind, because this is by cross-referencing with other verses. In this way, your nomadic life and wandering in the desert would also have come to an end, and you would also have achieved the means of protection from the harmful effects of the mistakes which you had committed. And if you had continued to live life in a balanced manner after this, the process of these successes and balanced deeds would have multiplied. And I've highlighted Sanazidul Mohsinin, that once people follow the laws of Allah, then these become multiplied with the passage of time. The process is slow, but as long as they are sticking to these laws, ultimately a lot of prosperities and successes come in their direction. Next verse is further comments on this verse 58. This verse is commonly translated as, and remember we said, enter this town and eat of the plenty therein as you wish, but enter the gate with humility in posture and words, and we shall forgive you your faults and increase the portion of those who do good. So the word forgive over here has been coming out of maghfirat. We can compare this with the meanings shared before. The meanings relate to two aspects highlighted in this verse. We can see the difference between these translations, which do not really amplify the true meaning of the verse. Firstly, guidance provided on the behavior and conduct when entering a new habitation, i.e., never forget to follow the laws of Allah. Secondly, if this is obeyed, then there will be provision of protection implicit in following these laws. The Quran here has also placed emphasis on displaying care and caution in the use of speech and words, and that is very important, because as mu'mineen, all these form part of our character building, that we are very much aware of what we say, in fact, what we think, and then what we say. These also have consequences. We can see the ugly display in the use of profanities and obscenities by the invading forces which operate under the Iblisi system. And we can look at some of the YouTube videos where, for example, the American forces went into Iraq and in people's homes, and what kind of a language they use. The verse then ends with the assurance by Allah that if this path is pursued, there will be an increase in the bounties of life. وَسَنَزِيدُ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. This path grants these bounties and prosperities very quickly. And we can see what is noted over here begins with sa, which means that you will get these results in fairly short period of time. Next verse 59, relating human actions and their effects to the law of requital. فَبَدَّلَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا قَوْلًا غَيْرَ الَّذِي قِيلَ لَهُمْ فَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا رِجْزًا مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْسُقُونَ. But you preferred a life of comfort and ease as opposed to a soldierly and toiling life. And in this way, abandoning the path proposed by us, adopted a different path. The consequence of which transpired from this was that according to the law of requital of Allah, weaknesses set in you, and your legs began to tremble badly. You no longer possessed any courage and resilience. The consequence of this was that the same land whose title deed had been written in your name could not come into your possession for 40 years. And that is something which we should look at these verses as well and cross-reference with that. The next slide is need to remain aware of the outcomes of decision making all the time. And this is something which we should keep in mind, that the Quran always tells us that whatever you are thinking and whatever decisions you are making, you should keep in mind the consequences of those actions of yours in short term, in long term, and in very long term, that is covering the hereafter as well. Here the Quran has drawn our attention while addressing Bani Israel to another important aspect of the human psyche. Once Musa guided them onto the correct path using the divine guidance, some of them, probably the majority, were bent upon doing injustices to themselves in terms of decision making, and this affected their collective life. Being divisive and harboring an unwillingness in our hearts prevents us from fully committing to the correct path. And this is an important point, that collectively, whatever we are doing, and if the team is not united at the level of hearts and minds, then they will not put in their best. And obviously, it will affect the outcome of the efforts of this team. In the short term, this causes weakness in our resolve, i.e., we understand that this path will definitely take us to the correct destination, which means one has to convince himself or herself. And that is what Eimaan means. But on the way, we become lazy, half-hearted, doubtful, even suspicious about the messenger or the message. And this is applicable to our life under the man-made system as well. Even people who do not have Eimaan, if they don't put in their best and they are not fully convinced of their goal in life, then they will not put in their best, and as a result, they will not get best out of their efforts. This has serious consequences to which the Quran has drawn our attention here. We will not reach our destination like this. So Quran says that you should firstly have an aim in life, and then you consistently and coherently work towards that aim. We witness this state of affairs in the world of 2026. Despite the evil effects manifesting all around us in the world, people are not willing to consider an alternative system. And Quran has said, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيَ النَّاسِ لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Fasad has appeared on land, sea, and because of what human hands have earned. And we can see plenty of fasad in today's world in every continent. That is, Allah may give them a taste of some of their deeds as per the law of requital, in order they may turn back. Because when we take a wrong path of life, its results appear before us, and we know the evidence of this fact that our path is wrong, but still people in power do not want to give it up. And it is the duty of the general public and others to keep reminding them and warning them. And of course, if they know about the Quran, they should come to the path of the Quran. By stating in the verse, Bima kanu yafsukun, they were displaying fisk, i.e., contravening the guidance of Allah. That is, they had become something different from what they should be by following the permanent values. And if our psyche is faulty, our deeds will also be wrong, and as a result, we will create fasad in the world. Next verse is 60. The system of deen is predicated on meeting the physical needs of all. وَإِذِسْتَسْقَى مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ فَقُلْنَا اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْحَجَرَ فَانْفَجَرَتْ مِنْهُ اثْنَتَا عَشْرَةَ عَيْنًا قَدْ عَلِمَ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ مَشْرَبَهُمْ كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا مِنْ رِزْقِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَعْثُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. Also recall that episode of your history when you had faced a shortage of water and Musa supplicated us for it, and we guided him to that place where springs of water were concealed. He reached there with his Jamaat, removed the soil from the rock, and not just one or two, but 12 springs gushed forth. He named these springs and informed every tribe which spring belonged to them. In this way, we liberated you from anxiety regarding the means of sustenance and warned that, be aware. Since your economic needs are now being met, do not create imbalances in society and disintegrate its cohesion. So we can see that their physical needs are being met adequately. That is, they have food available, natural food available in the desert where they were residing, and then the water is now becoming available to them. The next slide is the provision of water to sustain physical life is crucial and the responsibility of the system of deen. From a superficial and cursory reading of this verse, one may not find much which attracts our profound reflection. Because people go through these verses and they don't draw any conclusion, any benefit for themselves. But once we go through them very pedantically, very closely and strip them apart, then we can see there are a lot of lessons for our life of today. And once the system of deen is established, then these are going to provide that guidance. However, if we reflect carefully on what is noted here, then we can generate the desire to search for solutions to problems and can subsequently organize outcomes equitably within the society. This aspect becomes highlighted. So Quran over here is telling that water is important for human life, and we should make an effort to get water from the earth. And there is a plenty of water, drinking water available all over the planet. Faced with a shortage of water, Musa organized a search and found the place where spring of water lay undiscovered. As there were 12 tribes in Bani Israel, and we can say that was an organizational issue. And of course, they were divisive as well. And this question can come in our mind that why weren't they united? That is, they should have become one Jamaat. But decentralization is sometimes good as well for administrative arrangement and administrative facilities. An effort was made to find 12 springs. It is assumed that the water quality would have been the same and that the water was fit for consumption. Generally, spring waters, these come from the height and these are drinkable. The verse relates this effort towards Allah. All human potentials are bestowed free from Allah, and part of the education, training, and the self-development includes reminding ourselves in order to get best out of these potentials. And these potentials are both tangible and latent. That is, those are visible. For example, the physical potentials, we can see what we can do with our hands and legs and body. And latent are the ones which are related to our inner abilities and thought process. Towards the end, the Quran admonishes Bani Israel and also us not to adopt the path of mufsideen. So don't follow the path of those who create problems in the world. Challenges on the path leading towards self-development. Now over here, this verse, it's quite a long verse and there are a number of issues over here. I'll go through it. وَإِذْ قُلْتُمْ يَا مُوسَى لَن نَصْبِرَ عَلَىٰ طَعَامٍ وَاحِدٍ فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُخْرِجْ لَنَا مِمَّا تُنبِتُ الْأَرْضُ مِنْ بَقْلِهَا وَقِثَائِهَا وَفُومِهَا وَعَدَسِهَا وَبَصَلِهَا قَالَ أَتَسْتَبْدِلُونَ الَّذِي هُوَ أَدْنَىٰ بِالَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ ahbitu misran fa inna lakum ma sa'altum wa zuribat alayhimu zillatu wal maskanatu wa ba'u bi ghazabin min Allah zalika bi annahum kanu yakfuruna bi ayatillahi wa yaqtuluna nabiyyina bi ghayril haqqi zalika bima asaw wa kanu yatadun. Meaning of the verse: signposting the path of self-development. As has been said before, that is under verse 59, you preferred city life over soldierly life. That is why you told Musa that it is not possible for us that we keep consuming the same kind of food in this desert life day and night. So now they are getting fed up with the monotony of the same food because they are not realizing that they have a higher purpose in life. They came out of slavery, and from moving from slavery to a higher purpose of life, we have to resort to some kind of sacrifices. Therefore, go and request your Rabb to provide us with produce from the land. And because the messenger was there, so they were continuously supplicating to him that you should go to your Rabb and ask for more facilities and more conveniences. Vegetables, fruits, cucumbers, garlic are different types of grains, lentils, onions, etc. Even though the desert life was your military training ground and the food from there was such that it would have created the fire of life in you. And this is a very important point, that if our priorities become just to meet the physical needs, then we slow down. We forget the higher purpose of life. Musa replied, what an unfortunate situation this is, that instead of that superior life which was being proposed for you, you wish to adopt this kind of inferior life. If this is indeed your preference, then go and adopt an urban life. You will obtain all this there. And we can see this kind of attitude and outlook in particularly the third world countries where people are very much focused on food. And this is something which we have to take from today's presentation, that food is there just to get through the physical side of our life. We should have a higher aim in life where we have to be creative and think through the issues and why there are problems in the world. Because once we work for the system of deen, then essentially we have a very eminent and lofty aim in our mind to work towards the system of deen. And all these Western nations who have gone to different continents and discovered and went there and occupied them, they all had less emphasis on food. The consequence of this was that the abilities in them for combat and territorial conquest disappeared because they got lost into the physical needs, all the time thinking of food and convenience and physical comforts. And the disposition for servitude and apathy arose in them. And in this way, the divine chastisement of humiliation and ruin became imposed on them. All this occurred because they refused to live life according to the divine laws, and instead of respecting and honoring their Anbiya, because they refused to listen to them, they began plotting to humiliate their Anbiya without cause. That is, the messengers who came to them, they humiliated them because they didn't want to follow the divine laws, even to the extent of threatening the lives of some. And we can see that being displayed even in today's world when we, for example, under Tolu Islam, we pass on the message of the pure Quran, which is essential for establishing the system of deen. People don't like it. And they prefer to remain in that state of humiliation and disgrace which the man-made system has imposed on more or less everyone. All this was the consequence of their rebelliousness and exceeding of the limits. The next slide is elaborating a few points in this verse. A supreme fact of practical life is noted in this verse. Food is just the need for the physical side of life, whereas a higher priority should be given to those aspects of life which help develop the self. Therefore, time, focus, and efforts are required to be directed towards creating a better world. A lot is implicit in this paragraph, that our priorities should be towards the higher purpose of life. And Bani Israel were being told that you have come over to this desert conditions to become soldierly, to become strong, to become courageous, and leave behind all that mentality which you had acquired under Pharaoh's slavery. Bani Israel had spent centuries under subjugation without the guidance of pure Wahi, and they were essentially following the ritualistic form of deen, i.e., religion, just as today's Muslims are doing. A lot in this sentence, and we can discuss it under question and answer session. This is an uphill task needing patience, steadfastness, persistence, and determination, and the messenger Musa faced this situation squarely in the light of the guidance of Allah. And Bani Israel were not thinking, that is the majority. There were some who were thinking on those lines and had provided support to the messenger Musa. But they were not realizing that the messenger and some of his companions were actually working on these lines to develop themselves so that they can face the challenges of the future. This verse provides guidance to Mu'mineen by setting the perspective of making efforts towards the system of deen. While tayyib food is important for sustaining physical life, once the higher purpose of life is defined and willingly accepted, then the priority should be towards self-development. Once this aspect becomes entrenched in our minds, and this is important, we have to very carefully think through it over a fairly long period of time. That what do we want from our life and what the Quran is telling us and what guidance it is providing us towards that goal. Then the physical needs of life will become zalika mata'ul hayatid dunya. These are just needs requiring to be fulfilled in order to get through the journey of life. And there are a number of verses on this aspect where Quran says that you should consider this life to be a journey on which you require minimum to meet the needs of your physical side and keep your mind and outlook at a very high, lofty thinking and towards the system of deen. Human intellectual abilities multiply once we concentrate on the higher aim of life put forward by the Quran. And this is the aspect we are exploring on this platform. Next verse 62. Understanding this verse holds the key to removing any vagueness about the importance of Eimaan and Saleh deeds. Inna allazina amanu wallazina hadu wan nasara was sabiina man amana billahi wal yawmil akhir wa amila salihan falahum ajruhum inda rabbihim wala khawfun alayhim walahum yahzanun. I've highlighted over here that whatever is stated before this, the Quran has made it absolutely conditional that first you must have Eimaan in Allah in the hereafter, and then as a result of this Eimaan, you should do Amal Saleh, that is those deeds which will bring out your latent potentials. This has been your conduct, and despite this, your belief is that you are the favorite children of Allah, and that paradise is reserved for your race. And these kind of words we also hear under the sectarian Islam's belief system. This is your pipe dream. Paradise is not reserved for any race. Our law is that whether it is Jews or Christians, Sabians, or any kind of religious people, whatever belief systems they have, are those people who without entering some religion traditionally acknowledge Allah anyway, are those who are born into the homes of Muslims themselves. So this is not a question of whether one is a theist or atheist or holds what kind of belief. The Quran is very clear in its guidance in terms of Eimaan and Saleh deeds. No matter whoever they may be, whoever maintains Eimaan in the sovereignty of Allah, the continuity of life, and his law of requital in the way that it has been explained in this Quran, and according to his program carries out these deeds which develop the potentials. And this is not something which is not tangible. Once the potentials are developed, we know that these potentials have come out, and this is something which I did not, or we did not possess before acquiring Eimaan in the Quran. They will receive the reward for these according to the law of requital of their Rabb, the consequence of which will be that no kind of fear will grip them, nor will affliction become a cause for sorrow for them. Expanding it further. The common translation of this verse is those who believe in the Quran and those who follow the Jewish scriptures and the Christians and the Sabians, any who believe in Allah and the last day and work righteousness shall have their reward with their Lord. On them shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. And we can see that there is a problem with these kind of translations, because we come across some people who superficially go through this verse and try to convince themselves that everyone will go to paradise, because they think that paradise is some kind of a place in the hereafter, and here we can live life the way we like, and we just say we believe in God, and that will solve all their issues of self-development. But Quran is putting it emphatically, very clearly, right in front of us from the beginning till the end, that it is Iman plus solid deeds which will decide that what kind of a self we will have before we leave this world. If we go read the meanings and this translation a few times, we can see the difference in our understanding of this verse and picking up the points. The verse has appeared in the continuity of addressing Bani Israel and is making the life and death issue of our existence on this planet absolutely clear to the students of the Quran. We have so far learnt about the beliefs, behavior, and conduct of Bani Israel in the light of the Quran, and we are also well aware of the state of affairs of today's Muslims. From our education, training, and self-development, we can clearly see what the verse is telling us unambiguously. It is telling us that whatever beliefs we have and however strongly we may feel about going to paradise, the procedure put forward by Allah as Rabb of the Quran is, and I put down Rabb here, and because this cannot be translated into Lord or any other word, because Rabb is related to Rububiyat. It is related to human self-development. It is related to higher aim of life. Acceptance of Iman in Allah, that is the first step, plus the hereafter as noted in the Quran, and then as a consequence of this, acceptance in carrying out solid deeds. And this is something we should explain to others as well if people come out to support their own belief system by quoting this verse. Next slide is Iman and Saleh deeds, the recipe of becoming that moment which is the addressee of the Quran individually and collectively. It is very important to understand this aspect because this is the beginning of understanding the system of deen of the Quran. Why is there so much emphasis on accepting Iman and which is not faith or belief? Because we as humans cannot accomplish any task unless we are convinced about the need for this and then have the desire to go for it. This is why the Quran places repeated emphasis on changing what is in our nafs, that is in our psyche. And these slides are extremely useful for the education and training of our children as well. Quran has said, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma bi qawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. We have gone through this verse a number of times before. The change in the outer world is linked to the change within ourselves, psyche. This is an evidence-based fact in the word, because Quran, in the word of 2026, the Quran is addressing that any nation which wants to change the outer world must change their own psyche first. The Quran wishes us to acquire that psyche or self which can carry out those responsibilities which Allah directs us to carry out on His behalf in the human world, i.e. Allah needs us to help His cause or help Him. It's that simple proposition from His direction. We should keep in mind that the world in which we are living, the people who are making decisions as nation states, we can look at their psyche. And Quran is pointing to us that if the results, if they're creating facade in the world, that means their psyche is faulty, their psyche is iblisi and satanic. For this, He has given us His book called the Quran. It is our choice whether to accept this responsibility or not, i.e. without access to the knowledge of the Quran, this choice does not even appear on the horizon of our choices in this life. So we should tell people, first we convince ourselves and then tell others who are around us that look, without coming to the Quran and acquiring precisely that Iman which is given in the Quran, there is no possibility of getting into that Jannat which the Quran has promised to Mu'mineen. Because one hasn't become a Mu'min in the first place, which the Quran has put forward. This verse ends with an important effect of Iman plus Saleh deeds. It says, Wala khawfun alayhim wala hum yahzanun. If we recall verse 238, which also ended in this effect, فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Whoever followed this guidance, that is the Quran, the effect will be that they will be becoming free of khawf and huzn. That is the first stage, will be that they will understand why there is khawf and huzn, that is fear and grief and anxiety in the world in the first place. And then they will start working towards that system of deen, and that will gradually reveal to them that what is wrong with the man-made system and how these problems can be solved. Next slide is further elaboration of this verse. We can conclude from this brief premise that in verse 262, Iman is that which is explained in the Quran in detail, and the manifestation of this Iman leads to, as a sign, doing those solid deeds which are also explained in the Quran. Logically, it means that if that Iman is not accepted, then the question of those solid deeds simply does not arise, because the first condition is not fulfilled. It is simple cause and effect are the functioning of the law of requital. This issue comes up repeatedly from those people who read the Quran superficially and wish to assume that even without Iman, for example, non-Muslims who do charity work, why should they not go in that heaven which the Quran clearly states to be for those who accept Iman first and then do salih deeds? There's another very intricate point about which we have also mentioned previously. We should remember that the Jannat and the hereafter, the paradise and the hereafter under inverted commas, is that of Allah. So if we don't like Allah right in this word, that is, we do not like His book, we do not want to come to His book, we do not want to join those who are trying to follow this book and establish the system of deen, how do they expect to be in that Jannat where they will find Allah Himself all the time? Now this doesn't make sense. If we look at the world in which we are living under man-made system, if we hate the boss of some company and still we think that he will give us a job and we will stay happily in that company, it doesn't work. So those are the kind of things and arguments which we should go through in our own head and try to understand this verse with that perspective in mind. This misunderstanding is due to absence of comprehending the function of the human self and its psychology. The Quran has stated it very clearly, La ikraha fid deen qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy wa man yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. There is no compulsion in the matter of deen, it is our choice. If we like the Quran, we should come to the Quran. If we don't like the Quran, after reading through it, then we should discard it. The paths of haqq and batil have been made clear in the Quran. The one who rejects taghut, all man-made systems are taghuti systems, and accepts Iman in Allah, and then Quran says, then you have come to that path of life which will never let you down. The acceptance of Iman is that state of the human self where it itself knows about the change which has occurred within it. It's not otherworldly. It is not that we will come to know about it after our death. Right here, if we use the Quran as a criteria, we can figure out what kind of a self we have acquired by understanding the Quran. It simply cannot take place without the Quranic values. This self verifies it using the Quranic criteria. In this state of the self, good deeds are not carried out mechanically, that is to earn some swab, but with the clear and firm aim of establishing the system of deen and then joining together with those who are on this path. Let's go to the next verse, that is verse 63. Bani Israel again reminded about their covenant with Allah. وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ وَرَفَعْنَا فَوْقَكُمُ الطُّورَ خُذُوا مَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاذْكُرُوا مَا فِيهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. After this additional point, return again to your history and bring this reality to mind that the means for your physical security was managed in such a way that a mountain stood at your back and you were at its base. And for the protection of your humanity, you were provided with a code of life. And this thing took out that chance thing from their head, that by chance they have come to this mountain, and by chance they're at the base of this mountain, and by chance this food has come in their direction. Nothing is by chance in this world. Everything follows Allah's laws. After this, we had directed you to hold on to this code of guidance with great resoluteness, i.e., keep whatever has been stated in this constantly in your sights, so that you can remain protected from every hazard in life. You had pledged a firm commitment to this. So when we come to the Quran and we say that we accept Eimaan in Allah and we accept Eimaan in the hereafter, and then we commit to the value system of the Quran, then essentially we enter into an unwritten covenant with Allah. Next is, that is further elaboration of this verse. Bani Israel made their abode in the shelter of the foothills, and in this way a natural arrangement was made for their protection so that no one could attack them from the rear. This mountain is called Al-Tur. Tur means a lush green mountain, but with an al, that is al, prefixed before this word, it becomes a particular mountain. That is, it is a definite article, the mountain. This was that mountain where Musa was bestowed with wahi for the first time. This was that Al-Tur at the foot of which a covenant was taken from Bani Israel who were dwelling there. This is that same Al-Tur which is presented at a few other places in evidence as a link in the process of guidance and righteousness. And Quran has reminded us about this. For example, these are two verses quoted here. What was that covenant which was taken from Bani Israel at the foot of Al-Tur? It was that they should constantly keep in mind whatever commands are given to them through wahi. Hold firmly to them in the journey of life so that they can remain protected from the dangerous pitfalls of life. That which is called Eimaan in Allah is in fact a covenant with Allah that we will obey His bestowed laws and will observe the limits defined by Him. And obviously this is a slow, gradual process of acquiring that firm conviction within us by following this path. Next verse 64, attention is drawn towards the law of respite of Allah. Summa tawallaytum min ba'di zalika falawla fadlullahi alaykum wa rahmatuhu lakuntum min al-khasirin. We can see how through a process of making us understand what has happened in the past historically, and Quran is pointing to us that if you want to live a life under the system of deen, you have to learn lesson from all these verses. But after this firm commitment and agreement, you turned your back on it. It was because of our law of respite that you were not then immediately seized. If this had not been the case, then the bounties of life and the abundances of the means of sustenance which were available to you would have been immediately seized, and you would have been completely destroyed and ruined. Next slide is further elaboration. They turned their backs on their covenant. The consequence of this should have been their destruction, but since it was in Allah's program that they be given opportunities for reformation, therefore they were not destroyed. Instead, the period of their respite became extended as per law. And in fact, these Muslims of today are also going through a sort of period of respite, because though they are living under a terrible conditions of humiliation and disgrace at the hands of the more powerful nations who themselves are misguided, they still have some kind of a respite, and they should think and come to the book of Allah. This was the blessing of Allah and His rahmat. For any nation to receive a period of respite is indeed among the blessings of Allah. This occurs as per His law. Keeping provision for this kind of respite in the code of laws is nevertheless a divine blessing. But this nation did not make use of this time of respite either, and did not desist from their habit of transgression. The incident of the Sabbath is illustrated as evidence for this in the next verse. This is presented as a favor. However, this occurs as per Allah's strict law relating to the period of respite. They were entitled to this respite based on their actions which had not quite reached the level of meriting total destruction. Next verse is 65. Humiliation and disgrace needs to be recognized and then addressed. And this is important. If we firstly do not see our own humiliation and disgrace, we simply cannot even understand that what kind of a life we are living at a subhuman level. So Quran helps us to first understand that what is humiliation and disgrace of Taghuti system, and then tells us that if you want to come out of it, then here is the procedure, and the law of Allah will become on your side. It will be on your side and you will get all the help if you keep following this path. وَلَقَدْ عَلِمْتُمُ الَّذِينَ اعْتَدَوْا مِنْكُمْ فِي السَّبْتِ فَقُلْنَا لَهُمْ كُونُوا قِرَادَةً خَاسِئِينَ. Holding firmly to the code of Allah was a very great matter. Your immature character had reached to such a limit that when you are instructed to keep your business closed for one day in the week and to not catch fish, your avarice and covetousness could not tolerate even this degree of restriction, and you broke this rule and discipline. This did not cause any harm to us. You yourselves became embodiments of humiliation and disgrace walking about. You became shackled in the chains of subjugation of rebellious powers and became deprived of the prosperities of life. So Quran over here has pointed to one aspect of their contravening the law which they were supposed to obey in the land in which they were living. Aspects of this verse, for example, literal translation. The commonplace translation of this verse is, "And well, you knew those amongst you who transgressed in the matter of Sabbath. We said to them, be you apes, despised and rejected." And some people think that they literally turned into apes, as it will come later in the slides. The fundamental meaning of this root of as-sabtu is comfort and tranquility, and this means to give up work and the cessation of business. Since as-sabt has appeared here, therefore this means that day when Jews do not engage in any commerce, i.e. Saturday. I think they still follow it. One day's holiday or closing shop in a week is commonplace nowadays. This prohibition was also included in the customs of the Jews. After quoting from the Old Testament, Matna and Talmud, Hastings has noted in his encyclopedia that the Sabbath used to start from Friday evening and remained in place for the whole of Saturday. Apart from commerce, there were nearly 38 other matters in this which it was forbidden to do. And Quran has not imposed any kind of restriction. It has left to the system of Deen and Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen to decide if they want to have some kind of break one day or not. Sabbath and Qiradatan Khasi'een, apes despised. One day of rest in a week is no great matter, but when life is lived under some system, then it becomes necessary to observe even minor restrictions imposed by this system. So as and when system of Deen is established, one day can be allocated for this purpose depending on the economic conditions and the political conditions in that land, or may not have any day off in terms of, for example, initially when the transitional period is there, people should work a lot so that they can create a good system which caters for the needs of everyone. The character and conduct of a nation becomes tested through this kind of discipline. How will those people who cannot overcome even such a minor temptation and attempt to contravene this injunction stealthily through back doors face the greater challenges of life and succeed in these? And obedience to these kind of laws needs a lot of resoluteness and determination and conviction that these are for the good of everyone. The Quran has mentioned this incident in order to tell us that the Jews no longer retained even this much character. The root of the word Qiradatan is given here. Al-Qaradu was that wool which sheds of its own accord and cannot be woven. That is that wool which is of no use. So being useless, it would just be discarded. From this, the word began to be used to mean to be despised and humiliated. Therefore, Akradar Rajulu means that stagnation overcame this man due to depression and misery. That is, that human being became useless. He became humiliated and disgraced and considered it as if he became like the living dead. We can see that condition in the Muslim lands. From this point of view, they used to call every detestable and despicable thing as Qiradatu. Hence, this word is also used for leeches. From this, a monkey was called Al-Qirdu, which they viewed as a very detestable animal. These are the same meanings of the word Khasi'een also. Next verse is 66, learning a lesson from the history of rise and fall of nations. فَجَعَلْنَهَا نَكَالًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهَا وَمَا خَلْفَهَا وَمَوْعِظَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This humiliation and disgrace of yours holds the resources for instruction and learning a lesson for every one of those nations which wishes to remain protected from destruction, both for those who were your contemporaries and also for those who came after them, and read about your condition from the pages of history. Some have taken the metaphor of apes in 265 as literal conversion of humans to animals. We made this condition of theirs an admonition for those who were present in that era and also for those who were to come after them. And this matter is the source of hundreds of cautions for those who wish to remain protected from the hazardous pitfalls of life. If those people were really made into apes, then this transformation of theirs could have been a cause for learning a lesson for those people who saw them being made like this. But how could this have been a cause for admonition for those who came after them? The question over here is, will Allah turn human beings into apes just because they disobeyed His laws? And that means He will have to go against His own law, because that should be for all times, that as and when human beings disobeyed His laws, they should be turned into apes and monkeys. And we know that is not His law. So what is quoted over here in this verse is metaphorical. Today we see hundreds of apes. Does anyone among us ever think in this direction that they are from that same race of Bani Israel? Or that if we also transgress against the divine commands, then we too will become apes like them? Of course, metaphorically, we will. Actually, actual apes are no basis for us to learn a lesson. Although by presenting the example of desert wandering, homeless, humiliated, and disgraced Jews at every step, the Quran has explained to us that this is what the condition changes to of those people who go against the commands of Allah. Because they go to the sub-animal level. And we know there are verses regarding that these human beings who do not use their intellect and reasoning, they behave worse than animals. Because animals are created like that. They have their guidance inbuilt in them as instincts, whereas human beings make their own choices. The next verse is a quote from a modern author of an exposition. This matter is not only confined to our past followers of hadith only. In our own era, a mufassir called Abul Ala Maududi writes in his tafsir, Tafhimul Quran, some people think that their physical form was disfigured and transformed like unto that of apes, and some derive this meaning from it that traits like those of apes emerged in them. But from the words and style of the Quran, it does appear as if this disfiguration was not a moral one, it was corporeal. So he writes that this was definitely a change in their physical stature, in their physical form, that they did become apes. In my view, my guess, and I've highlighted my guess. See, by wrong meanings and translations, interpretations, how we misguide human beings. In my view, my guess would be that their brains would have been left in the same state as before, while their bodies would have become disfigured and turned into those like apes. And I've quoted over here, and I have read it myself as well. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.